Hello everyone, I cordially welcome you all to another video from the React tutorial series, and in this video we are going to discuss on lifecycle methods in React. So what are lifecycle methods? As we have already discussed in our previous videos, components are unit independent pieces of code which runs as per the events, user interactions or DOM updates take place. Every React component has its own lifecycle which can mainly be divided under three phases. The phases are as follows: mounting phase, updating phase and unmounting phase. Now these are the three phases which a React component uses. Now one thing you must remember, that is these lifecycle methods, which are also sometimes known as lifecycle hooks, are used only in class components. They are not used in function components. Okay. You might think that why do we need these component phases? We need these lifecycle methods because using these methods we can optimize our component. Not only we can optimize our component, but we can also use some additional feature in our React components. Okay, so let's start with the mounting phase. Mounting phase, as the name suggests, mounting phase happens when elements are being put into the DOM, basically rendering the JSX elements returned by the render method. In this phase there are four lifecycle methods involved. They are as follows: constructor, get derived state from props, render and component did mount. So let's study about each one of them in detail. The first one is the constructor. This is optional in React. This executes before anything is executed. This is called when the component is initiated and is the best place to set initial state of the component and also to bind event handlers with the component. So if you have read the blog or if you have gone through our previous video, you will see that there we have discussed about React constructors in class component. So if you are interested to deep dive into this subject, you can watch our previous videos. But here in short, we have given the syntax how we write a constructor in React class component. So a constructor first receives the props which it gets from its parent component, and then it calls the super keyword and passes the props as argument. This is essential to address the props from within the constructor using the this keyword. Okay, like in JSX we can directly use these props using this.props, but if we want to use the same thing from within the constructors, we do need this super keyword to pass the props to the parent constructor, and then we can initialize our state. Here though I haven't showed you one thing, that is we can also bind event handlers. So if you want to know how we bind event handlers in the constructor method, you can watch our previous video. So let's go to the next method. The next method is called get derived state from props. This method is also optional and is called right before the render method. This method is used to accept props and set the state as per the props received, and then return an object with changes in the state. So if you can see the code sample, you can see this method is declared static and it accepts two arguments, the props and the state. And what it does, it returns the updated state variable, setting the recent data of the state by the data which it receives as props. Okay, and as you know, this is also optional in React class component. The next phase which we are going to talk about, the most popular of the phase method, is the render method. This method is mandatory in React class components. This is used to return the JSX element which gets rendered in the DOM. So if you have watched our previous videos, which I highly recommend, you will know about this render method. So in React class component, render method is used to return a React node which contains our JSX code which gets rendered on the browser. Okay. The next method which we are going to talk about is the component did mount. This method is also optional and is called just after the render method. In this state, we write code that needs to be executed once after the DOM has been rendered. So the component did mount is a method which is available in React class component. In this method, we can write the codes which we want to be executed once the DOM has been rendered. That is, our JSX code has been successfully mounted on the UI. Okay. The next phase which we are going to talk about is the updating phase. So as we know, React helps us to create dynamic web pages which can be highly interactive. This happens when the component state or props changes as per user's interactivity. So when local state of the component changes or the props received by the component changes, the component is re-rendered on the DOM. This phase involves the following 5 lifecycle methods. The first one is component will receive props. The second one is should component update. The third one, again the most popular, render method. The fourth one, get snapshot before update. The last but not the least is the component did update. So let's learn about each one of these methods one by one. So first we will start with the component will receive props method. This method only involves props. This is triggered after the mounting of the component before its props are updated. It checks the old and new props and updates the DOM accordingly. Now one thing which you might take a note of is this method has currently been deprecated. But still, as this was available for a long time, I would like to teach you about this method. The component will receive props except the updated props and it checks the current props with the updated props. Okay. So how you can basically utilize this? This methods in different phases actually helps you to optimize the React code. So suppose there is some activity which you want to do only if the received props and the current props are different. In those scenarios, you can use this method to optimize your React code. Okay. Let's go to the next method. The should component update. In React, by default, when any props or state data changes, the DOM is repainted. Sometimes it might not be the desired outcome as per the requirement. So we use this method to optimize the rendering. If this method returns true, DOM is re-rendered. Otherwise not. By default, it returns true. So now, this method, as you can see on my screen, returns a boolean value. It can either be a true or can be a false. So this method is highly used to optimize the React class component. Depending on some situation, probably the received props or the state value, you can decide whether your component on being updated should render or not. Okay. Let's go to the next method. Again, the most popular one of them, the render method. So this method is mandatory in React class component. This is used to return the JSX element which gets rendered in the DOM during the component update. This we have already discussed in the mounting phase also. But you might ask, hey, why this render method is in both mounting phase and in updating phase? So one thing you need to understand, which I have already discussed, this render method is the main method which actually returns the JSX code which gets displayed on the browser. So whenever a component is instantiated, we need to show something by default. So we need the render method. And when any local state get updated, we again need to repaint the DOM. So again we need this render method. Okay. The next method is get snapshot before update. This method is also optional in React. Even after the component has updated, we can access the state and props before the update using this method. It takes the previous props and state as arguments. Whenever this method is included, it is mandatory to use the component did update method, which we are going to discuss in the next slide. So this get snapshot before update takes two arguments, the previous props and the previous state. Okay. And here in the snapshot, we have just console.log them out, but you can use this code to perform some action. Okay. The next method which we are going to discuss is the component did update. This method is optional and is called after the render method once when the DOM has been updated. So as you can see on my screen, the component did update basically gets called when the component has been mounted on the browser. That is, we can see the UI on the browser screen. So once the component has been updated, you want to perform some specific action. So if there is any such scenario in your application, you might consider using component did update in your React class component. Okay. The last phase which we are going to talk about is the unmounting phase. So in this unmounting phase, there are no other methods available apart from component will unmount. So this phase occurs when a component in React is about to unmount. This phase only has one method, that is component will unmount. It is called when the component is about to be removed from the DOM. Okay. Now, few things which I would like to clarify. The first of all, and the most important point, these different phases and these different methods in each of these phases are only used in React class component. In function component, you need not to use them because their way of coding is different. Okay. The second thing is that not all methods in all phases are mandatory. You might consider avoiding most of them if you don't need in your application. But most of these methods actually help you to optimize your app. Okay. The most important method which we'll use is constructor and the render method, because constructor initializes the local state, it does the event binding, and it also passes your props to the parent constructor such that you can use these dot props from within the constructor. Okay. And another thing which I would like to discuss is basically, you might ask me that when we are using function components in React, why do we need to learn about this? You are absolutely correct. In the current scenario, it is recommended to use functional components as the existence of hooks has made us possible to reuse these situations in function component as well. But since most of the time the class components were available and these methods actually served the purpose, so I think it is highly beneficial if you learn about them. Okay. So this is all for now. I hope you like this video. In case you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. This would greatly motivate us to create more videos in the upcoming future. And for any queries, doubts, feedbacks or suggestions, feel free to post them in the comment section. We are going to reply. So thank you for now. See you in the next video. Bye.